Good evening, everyone. Before the stories begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. The more you engage, the more these chilling tales will return to your feed. Now, let's step into the dark together. It happened on the night of February 9th, 2022, in Franklin County, Tennessee. One of those damp southern nights where the roads shine like mirrors after a drizzle, and the air smells faintly of gasoline and pine. 20-year-old Eli Marston had just finished a late shift at a bar and grill off Highway 64. He wasn't supposed to work that night, but a coworker called in sick, and Eli needed the extra cash. His Honda Civic had been stalling for weeks, so he figured he'd ask one of the regulars, a guy named Cal Whitaker, for a quick ride home. It was a small-town kind of favor people did all the time. No one thought twice about it. Cal was in his late 30s, a construction worker who drank light beer and kept to himself. He wasn't exactly friendly, but he'd always tipped well and made small talk with Eli about cars and college football. That night, Cal left the bar about 15 minutes after Eli clocked out. Surveillance footage showed Eli following him into the parking lot around 12:37 a.m. They exchanged a few words by the truck, then both got in. It was the last time anyone saw Eli alive. At first, no one panicked. Eli often crashed at friends' places, especially when he missed the last bus. But when he didn't show up for his morning shift, and his mom said he hadn't come home, his boss reported him missing. Police started with phone records. His cell pinged once on a tower near Cowan Road at 1:12 a.m., then went dark. It was rural land out there, fields, forests, and a stretch of unlit road locals called the Blind Mile, because fog settled so thick you couldn't see your own headlights. Detectives brought in Cal for questioning the next day. He claimed he dropped Eli off near the highway turnoff around 1 a.m., saying the kid wanted to walk the rest of the way. It sounded odd, but not impossible. There was no proof to contradict him, so they let him go. That was their first mistake. 2 days later, a hunter found Eli's wallet in a ditch off Cowan Road. Cards still inside, cash gone. The ground around it was muddy, tire tracks running parallel to shoe prints. They belonged to a work boot about size 11. Cal wore size 11. The sheriff sent deputies to his property for a voluntary check. But when they arrived, he wasn't home. The truck was. The tires had been recently washed, still wet enough to drip onto the gravel drive. Inside the truck bed, they found a tarp and a half-used can of bleach. Both were common items, sure, but together they looked bad. Cal showed up midway through the search and acted surprised, telling officers he'd spent the morning at a hardware store in Tullahoma. Receipts backed that up. So once again, they let him go. That was their second mistake. Over the next week, volunteers scoured miles of woodland and creeks looking for Eli. Local news stations ran his photo hourly. Brown hair, blue eyes, gray hoodie with the bar's logo on the chest. Eli's mother made a tearful plea for information. Meanwhile, Cal kept showing up at the bar like nothing happened. One coworker remembered him saying, "You gotta be careful who you trust these days," before ordering a beer and watching the coverage from his usual corner seat. The bartender thought he was just nervous. He wasn't. 3 weeks later, a search team discovered a pair of work gloves wedged between rocks in a creek bed half a mile from the Blind Mile. The inside lining was stiff with dried blood. DNA matched Eli. Forensics also found a trace of motor oil mixed in, the same brand Cal used in his truck. Police obtained a warrant and searched his property again, this time digging up the rear lot. Under a pile of burnt debris, they found scraps of fabric that matched Eli's hoodie logo, but no body. Cal stuck to his story. He dropped Eli off and went home. No one could prove otherwise. The case began to stagnate, and the town moved on. Then, nearly 6 months later, a teen couple exploring an abandoned farm just outside Winchester found something wedged behind the false wall of a shed. An old burner phone, battery dead, screen cracked. Detectives charged it, and found a single video file timestamped February 9th, 1:24 a.m. The footage showed the inside of a pickup truck. Eli was in the passenger seat, filming himself with the front camera. He looked tired but relieved. "Finally headed home," he said quietly. The camera panned to Cal driving, expressionless, hands tight on the wheel. Then Cal spoke softly, almost cheerful. "Shortcut through the back roads, won't take long." The video ended there. Police never released what came next on that video. But sources later leaked that the final minute was recorded in total darkness, and the only sound was Eli saying, "Cal, stop, you missed the turn." Then a door slamming. Then nothing but crickets. For weeks, investigators kept the phone evidence under wraps. Only a handful of detectives and the district attorney had seen the full video. But rumors spread fast in a town that size. People said you could hear Eli breathing hard, asking, "Where are we?" And Cal replying, "Don't worry, almost there." Then the sound of gravel under tires, doors opening, and a voice, low, muttering, before the video cut off completely. The leak forced police to reopen the case in full. They got a warrant for every property Cal had worked on in the last year. He'd done freelance construction, roofing, fencing, driveways. One address stood out, an unfinished cabin in the woods off Flat Creek Road. When deputies reached it, the place was quiet, half-built, windows covered with plastic sheets flapping in the wind. The inside smelled of sawdust and mildew. They found a generator, a few beer cans, and in the corner, a length of nylon rope looped like a noose. The ground behind the cabin was uneven, like someone had dug and filled it again. Crime scene techs started digging. 3 feet down, they hit denim, then bone. The remains were later confirmed to be Eli's. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the head. It wasn't rage, it was methodical. They also found Cal's watch buried with him. Cracked face frozen at 1:36 a.m. That time matched the missing 10 minutes between the last video frame and the final cell tower ping. Cal was arrested at a motel outside Huntsville, Alabama. He didn't resist, didn't ask why, didn't even deny it. In interrogation, he said one thing. "I told him to get out. He wouldn't." When pressed, he stared at the wall for an hour before saying, "He looked at me like I was some kind of monster." That was it. No confession, no reason. During trial, prosecutors laid out the timeline. Eli's car troubles, the ride offer, the detour. They showed footage from a gas station camera 20 miles off the supposed route. Cal's truck idling while he bought duct tape and bleach. They produced the gloves, the hoodie fragments, and the phone video. When the audio played in court, you could hear faint rustling after the door slam, then a hollow metallic thud, like a crowbar hitting concrete. The courtroom went silent. Cal kept his eyes on the floor. His defense claimed a fight broke out, and Eli fell. That panic made Cal hide the body. But jurors didn't buy it. They convicted him of second-degree murder after 2 hours of deliberation. He got 45 years with no parole. The strangest part came afterward. Investigators learned Cal had given rides home to at least 3 other young men from the bar in the months before Eli's death. Each described the same pattern. Cal insisted on taking back roads, talking in long, wandering monologues about how people don't appreciate the chances they get. None of them thought much of it then. They just got uneasy and asked to be dropped early. Eli was the one who didn't. Eli's mother still drives past the bar once a week. She leaves flowers at the highway turnout where Cal claimed he dropped him off. She says she does it not because that's where her son died, but because that's where he made the decision that changed everything. The decision to trust someone who didn't deserve it. Detectives eventually released the final line from Eli's recovered video. His voice was quiet, almost resigned, like he already knew something was wrong. He said, "You sure this road even goes home?" That single sentence became the title of every podcast and news segment about the case. It summed up the truth better than any verdict could. One bad decision, one shortcut taken on a dark Tennessee back road, and a life that never made it home. It started like most bad decisions do, with good intentions. In April 2021, Noah and Lydia Hartwell were just another small-town couple trying to stay afloat in Russellville, Arkansas. The poultry plant where Noah worked had cut his hours, and the bills were stacking faster than his paychecks. They'd already sold their second car, canceled streaming services, and picked up weekend shifts wherever they could. But by the time their landlord posted an eviction notice, the only thing left to give up was pride. Every night Lydia scrolled Craigslist listings on her cracked phone, searching for something cheap, anything close enough that Noah could still bike to work. That's when she found the ad for a 2-bedroom farmhouse quiet area, utilities included. The photos showed freshly painted walls, a wide yard with a picket fence, and a long gravel driveway that looked like something out of a Hallmark postcard. The rent was half what they'd been paying. The description was oddly simple. Long-term tenants preferred. No background checks required. Call Warren. They called that evening. The man on the other end sounded older, polite but curt, his voice rough like gravel. He told them the house used to belong to his brother, who had passed sudden, and said he didn't want it sitting empty. He offered to meet them the next morning. Warren Ellis pulled up in a faded green pickup, maybe late 60s, thin, soft-spoken, the kind of rural polite that feels both safe and slightly off. He showed them around the place, every door already unlocked. He said all he asked was that they keep it clean, pay rent on time, and not bother with paperwork. No deposit, no lease, just a handshake and first month's rent in cash. Noah hesitated, but Lydia squeezed his hand. They moved in that same afternoon with their mattress, a thrift store couch, and whatever boxes they could fit in the Civic. At first it felt like a blessing. The land around the house sloped gently into fields of clover, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. Evenings were filled with the sound of cicadas and the faint hum of trains rolling through town. They'd sit on the porch with canned beer and talk about saving enough to buy it outright one day. But peace in places like that never lasts. Within a week, Lydia began to notice things she couldn't quite explain. The porch light flickering, the sound of gravel shifting outside when the motion sensor didn't trip, faint electrical clicks coming from inside the walls after midnight. She mentioned it to Warren when he dropped by to collect the next week's payment. He smiled like it was nothing and said, "Old place like this got quirks. Probably squirrels in the wiring." He promised to send a maintenance guy to check it out. 2 days later, a white panel van rolled up while Noah was at work. A man in dusty coveralls introduced himself only as Donnie and said Warren had sent him. Lydia watched him from the kitchen as he unscrewed a few outlet plates, muttering to himself. He stayed maybe 20 minutes, then left without saying a word. That night, Lydia noticed a small, perfectly round hole drilled into the drywall just above their dresser. She thought maybe it was from the outlet inspection, but when she looked closer it was too deliberate. Clean edges, no plaster dust. She tried to peek inside with her phone flashlight, but all she saw was black. By the end of that week, Noah's nerves had started to fray. He taped over the vents, unplugged the TV, even covered the tiny red light on the smoke detector with electrical tape. Lydia laughed at first, but the laughter died the night they both woke up to the faint sound of static coming from the living room. The TV had turned itself on again, volume low, displaying a gray screen of snow. Noah unplugged it, but when he turned back toward the hallway, Lydia swore she saw movement in the reflection on the dark glass, something small and quick retreating out of frame. They told themselves it had to be their imagination, fatigue, stress. Still, neither of them slept well after that. On May 6th, Lydia called her sister Anna just after dinner. She said she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the house when they were asleep, that things kept getting moved. Her hairbrush, a coffee mug, a shoe left turned the wrong way near the door. Anna told her she was probably just anxious from the move and should give it a few more weeks. That call lasted 4 minutes and 53 seconds. It was the last time anyone outside the property heard Lydia's voice. According to Noah's later statement, he left early the next morning to pick up extra hours at the plant. Security footage never showed him arrive. When investigators checked phone records, his cell pinged once near a rest stop east of town at 5:02 a.m., then went dark. The same night, neighbors remembered seeing the Hartwells' porch light flicker on around 4:17, then off again at 4:20. After that, nothing. The house sat dark for 2 full days. On the 3rd day, Warren Ellis arrived unannounced, claiming he'd come to check the gutters. When no one answered, he unlocked the door himself. Later, he told police the place looked empty and tidy, like they'd just stepped out. But he admitted, only after detectives pressed him, that he'd removed a small black box from under the couch before calling 911. By the time deputies reached the property, the box was gone, and so were Noah and Lydia. Inside, officers found a scene that didn't line up with a simple disappearance. Every room had small circular holes drilled at shoulder height, above the bed, behind the bathroom mirror, under the kitchen counter facing the table. When investigators opened the walls, they discovered thin wires snaking upward toward the attic. Up there sat a folding metal chair, a portable monitor, and a tangle of cables connected to a Wi-Fi router labeled EllisNet ZAR2. Whoever had been inside those walls hadn't just watched the couple. They'd been living there, listening. Warren Ellis was nowhere to be found. When investigators traced the router labeled EllisNet 02, they discovered it was still broadcasting. The signal came from somewhere just beyond the property line, deep in a patch of trees that bordered an abandoned cattle field. Deputies combed through underbrush for nearly half an hour before finding the source. A rusted travel trailer sunk into mud and vines. Inside, the air was thick with ammonia and dust. A single bare bulb hung from a wire, illuminating walls covered in printed screenshots. Grainy stills of Noah and Lydia eating dinner, brushing their teeth, sleeping. Each photo was dated and neatly labeled. There were hundreds. A narrow cot sat in the corner beside an open laptop, its desktop filled with file names beginning with Sycamore. The newest folder was time-stamped 2 days after the couple vanished. In the sink was a coffee mug streaked with lipstick that matched a tube found in Lydia's purse. On the floor near the cot, detectives found 2 sets of footprints, one small, one large, leading out through the rear door. They followed them about 30 yards before the smaller prints disappeared. The larger ones continued toward the riverbank, where they stopped abruptly at the edge of the water. No body, no drag marks, nothing. When they searched Warren Ellis's known addresses, every one of them turned out to be a vacant lot or an alias lease paid in cash. The only solid lead came from a fingerprint lifted off the mug. It belonged to a man named Donnie Hale, a former maintenance contractor who had gone missing in 2018 while working on a property owned by Ellis. Days stretched into weeks. The case became a local obsession, the kind that fuels podcasts and midnight Reddit theories. People said Ellis had built a series of rentals across rural counties, wiring them all with hidden cameras, renting each to young couples who were desperate enough not to ask questions. He'd watch them for months until they noticed something wrong. Then, before they could move, he'd visit. None of this was proven, but what police found next made it hard to dismiss. Deep inside the trailer's floor panel, behind the water tank, they uncovered a hard drive wrapped in plastic. Forensics recovered over 400 hours of video spanning multiple houses, different states, even a few that had since burned down. Each clip ended the same way. The tenants looking directly into the lens, startled as if realizing in that instant they were not alone. Then static. When the footage from the Sycamore Lane house was reviewed, the final file stopped everyone cold. It showed Lydia pacing the kitchen at night, phone pressed to her ear during the call to her sister. In the reflection on the microwave, a faint movement appeared behind her. Someone stepping out of the pantry, face obscured by a camera harness. Lydia froze mid-sentence, eyes widening, and the feed cut to black. The timestamp was 8:46 p.m., exactly 15 minutes before Noah's phone went offline. No follow-up clip existed. 6 months later, the property was bulldozed. The field where the trailer had sat was cleared, but locals still avoided the road. In 2022, a new family bought the land and built a prefab home there. Within a month, they contacted police after finding a motion-activated light in their attic that they hadn't installed. It was wired to an old router hidden under insulation. The serial number matched the evidence list from the Ellis case. No one ever figured out how it got there. Warren Ellis was never found. His pickup surfaced near a boat ramp in Louisiana with the keys still in the ignition and a map on the passenger seat marked with a single word in pen, "Next." Authorities eventually closed the Hartwell case without remains, listing both Noah and Lydia as presumed deceased. But the story never really ended. Contractors renovating houses across central Arkansas kept reporting small round holes in drywall, always the same size, always facing beds or dining tables. Most were patched without mention, but once in a while a new tenant would notice late at night that the patch didn't sit quite flush, that a faint clicking came from behind it when the lights went out. When Rachel Keene agreed to house sit for her boss that October weekend, she thought it would be an easy way to earn a few $100s and maybe repair things with her fiancé, Dylan Reyes. They both needed a break. Rent was behind, Dylan's last freelance photo gig had fallen through, and their apartment and bar felt like a box filling with unpaid bills. Clara Wynn, Rachel's supervisor at the real estate firm, was one of those polished women who made you feel poor just by standing near her. She owned 3 vacation homes and changed cars every other year. On Thursday, she stopped by Rachel's cubicle and said, almost casually, "You and Dylan should take care of my lake place for the weekend. It's automated, nothing complicated. Feed the cat, keep the lights running, I'll pay you cash." Rachel said yes before thinking twice. The address was outside Brattleboro, near a private stretch of water called Lindell Lake. Clara handed her a silver fob and a printed list titled Smart Home Guidelines, 12 neat bullet points that read more like commandments than instructions. The first one said, "Do not alter preset lighting schedules." The second said, "Never disable internal cameras, insurance requirement." The 12th said only, "All systems are voice responsive. Do not engage unless necessary." They drove up Friday afternoon under a thin autumn drizzle. The road wound through maple forest for nearly 20 minutes without another house in sight. The lake appeared suddenly, gray, flat, perfectly still, and at its edge sat a glass and concrete structure that looked more museum than home. The place smelled faintly of cedar and disinfectant. Inside were floor-to-ceiling windows, motion-activated lights, and a hum that seemed to come from inside the walls. A cat named Juniper greeted them with a half-hearted meow before vanishing under the couch. Rachel read the laminated rules again and laughed. "Guess we're living in the future," she said. Dylan unpacked his camera bag and tried not to notice the tiny black domes tucked in each corner of the ceiling. That first evening passed like a vacation. They cooked pasta, drank the cheap Merlot they'd brought, and watched fog creep across the lake. Around 10, the living room lights dimmed to amber on their own. Then a woman's voice drifted from the ceiling speaker, soft, robotic, and unsettlingly polite. "Good night, Clara." The lights faded out completely. Rachel assumed it was a pre-programmed script, maybe the system mistaking her for the homeowner, but the precision of the voice left her uneasy. Dylan teased her, called it the ghost of Alexa, and they went to bed laughing, though neither of them slept deeply.